Right. In Genesis chapter 30, we started looking at Joseph as an example of a worker. And what a worker. And we looked at how Joseph worked in his youth. He worked in his youth. I just had the opportunity to go to the Owl's Head Transportation Museum. If you've ever been there, I hadn't been since my dad took me. I think I was in junior high, and it was only a couple years old. And anyway, we were going through. It was Barrick and I went. Somebody gave us. We got in for free, but I started reading about a Rolls Royce that was there, and it said that Royce was a poor boy that became it didn't give the detail, it didn't give a lot of details. It just said he became the head of his family at 9 years old. 9 years old, that he started selling newspapers and delivering telegrams at 9 years old to help provide for his family. The society today would say that that's child abuse, that you shouldn't have children doing that. Well, you look at Samuel as just a little child. He was helping, he was working, he was ministering in the tabernacle. David, just a little boy, out taking care of the sheep. Here we have Joseph, though he's 17 years old. He's got a great responsibility. He's traveling from town to town here, looking for his brothers, helping care for the sheep. Because we were down to the Camden Rockland area. It wasn't too long ago. I read about, and I'm afraid to say which head of one of the founders or the ones that built Camden up. I almost think it was Curtis Island right offshore there, named after him. But don't quote me on that. But I was reading one of the founders of the town, and that his dad died when he was young, and that it was like 11, 12 years old that he would cut a whole load of firewood, load the wagon up, and leave when it was still dark to come over the hills. You hear Camden Hills? He'd bring his wagon of firewood over the hills and down into town, and he would sell loads of firewood. He'd deliver it to the different businesses that were trying to keep their offices and different things warm. And workers, what's happening to our country? What's happening to young people? It used to be, we were so blessed back in the farming days, where young people grew up working alongside dad, doing chores, and developing a responsible schedule and just working and working. And that's a biblical example. And we looked at how Joseph, when the story just starts out about his life, it all revolves around work. And that's how so many stories in the Bible, James and John, Peter and Andrew, they were out working when the Lord calls them. Elisha, he's working with how many? A yoke of oxen. God calls him, and he takes and he sacrificed those yoke of oxen and went to work for the Lord. But God calls, and God uses young people that like to work. When you read about the virtuous woman in Proverbs 31, she just doesn't stop working. It's work, work, work. She is a worker. And we have, our country was founded on what we call the Puritan work ethic, or some call it the Protestant work ethic, which is said that all of it is Christians because they work for the Lord. And it's not, they're not working for themselves, they're working to please the Lord. And so it's not just going to the job, punching in, punching out, going home and watching football, basketball, baseball for the rest of the night, which is how so many people look at work. It is, I go home and see what I can do to, make the house look nice or clean things up or work. And it's all working to please the Lord. And yes, it's time like Jacob took in the evening tide, it says, to go out and meditate. And there's time for romance, and there's time for many, many things God has blessed us and given to us to enjoy life. He's given us all things richly to enjoy. But I think work is one of the things that we are to enjoy. Not always. There's things that difficult things. Let me give a little review. We said last week that Joseph worked in his youth. Then we said Joseph worked for his father, which we need fathers that will teach their children to work and mothers that will teach their children to work. But we also think about how Joseph points to the Lord Jesus. And Jesus said, I must be about my Father's business. And Jesus said, I do always those things that please my Father. And Joseph is an example where he worked for his father. We said Joseph worked in a difficult environment. He started out working with his brothers that hated him, and then they hated him even more, and then they hated him even more, and then they took him and were going to kill him, but they sold him into slavery. But he went from that difficult situation where he still worked. He went from that difficult situation to being sold into slavery and working for Potiphar. And there we said he worked a job that he did not choose. He didn't choose to work for Potiphar, but he still was an excellent worker and was given great authority and responsibility because he's such an excellent worker. He worked a job, when he worked for Potiphar, he worked a job that he did not choose. He worked a job that did not line up with his experience. He was a shepherd boy. Now he's going to manage a household. Well, I don't like this job. It's not, this doesn't fit up to me, so I'm just not. Today's attitude is, this job doesn't line up with me, so I'm just not going to work. Well, you got to work what you got to do what you got to do sometimes. And I always say, I had to work at Burger King one time. That was torture. Working at Burger King was, that's not my person. My wife liked working at McDonald's. She worked at McDonald's 10 years off and on while she was going through college and high school. But anyway, sometimes you got to work what you got to work because work honors God. It honors God. And not working, it doesn't honor God. And so Joseph worked. He worked. When he worked for Potiphar, it was a job he did not choose. It was a job that did not go with his experience. It was a job that did not match up to his values. Now, you don't want to take a job that doesn't match up with your values as far as you got a choice in America. You don't want to go work at a bar or sell lottery tickets or whatever. But here, Joseph was put into a situation in Egypt that they didn't know the values of the Lord. They didn't know about salvation promise through the coming Savior. And Joseph still worked and excelled and did a great, great job. And then on top of all that, the job Joseph worked, and like we said, he did such an excellent job, but Joseph's, it seemed like everything was going against his dream. His dream that God was going to exalt him and honor him. Working as a slave for Potiphar, how's that fit into my dream? He could have thought. But God was behind it all. But Joseph's just a good worker. Number 4, we said Joseph was an available worker. If you look in Genesis chapter 37, when his father called him, verse 13, Israel said unto Joseph, do not thy brethren feed the flock in Shechem? come, and I will send thee unto them. He said unto him, Here am I. Which? He was available. And right now in the United States, we have those that want to work and they won't let them work. But then we have the other side of the coin where there's so many people that don't want to work, whether they're afraid or whether they are getting more now that they're getting unemployment. It pays them more than going to the job, whatever it may be. They're not available for work. And Joseph had that attitude, here am I. Just like Moses and Isaiah and Samuel, they all like, here am I. Some kids develop, if the parents can't let this happen, but, kids they like to pretend they didn't hear their mother saying, I need you, come do this. Oh, I didn't hear you say that. Yeah, like it. We know, yeah. But we weren't born yesterday like you were. Oh, I didn't hear you say that. So let's say, be available. Here am I. Number 5, I don't know I think we stopped at that Joseph was available. We're going to mention number 5 this morning. Joseph was an obedient worker. He was an obedient worker. His father sent him out to check on his brothers, and he went. And even though he could have said, I'm going to go check on them. Or did I stop at this point last week, sweetie? Okay, well then this is new point. Is that Joseph was an obedient worker. His father sent him to go check on his brothers. David was the same way. David's big brother, in Sunday school, Barrick was talking about Eliab, that's right, that just mocked his little brother and thought his brother was proud. And David could have said, why do I want to go bring them any cheese? I'll eat the cheese myself. Here we got Joseph. He could have said, Dad, why do you want me to go check on them? They hate me. And that's what today, the Lord says, I want you to go and preach my gospel to every creature. Bring the gospel to every creature. You go. Why? They don't want to listen. They think that we are crazy. They think we're strange. They have no, 40 years ago, a lot of people had a general concept of the Bible and respected the Bible. Now with the liberal agenda and the socialist agenda, they cast scorn on the Bible. And, you're really, you're not thinking right if you believe the Bible. How could you believe the Bible? And God says, go and tell them that I love them and that I died for them. You go, you obey. A lot of churches today that have just given up on evangelism, drifted away. We're not going to... I had a pastor one time, I knocked on a pastor's door, and the pastor's like, what are you doing? And I said, well, I was going to give the tract that my wife wrote about Heidi, and I thought he could use it at his church. And he said, you just come knocking at my door? And I said, yeah. This is a pastor. This is a pastor in Lincoln. He said, people don't do that. People don't do that. That's not normal, knocking on somebody's door. Well, it should be for you. You're a pastor. At least, God said to go. God said to go. And Joseph was obedient. Number six, Joseph was a persistent worker. He was a persistent worker. I think of a kid, I don't know, I might have just told the story. I think I did. It was a kid that came out to church, and he got a job at Haskell's mill down. Used to be a hardware. In the back there, he got a job stacking lumber. He worked one day. Next day, he wouldn't get out of his bed. His mother said, "Aren't you going to work?" He said, "I'm sore all over." Well, yeah, you'll get over that after you work for, who knows. It might take a couple of weeks. You'll get over that soreness. You stick with it. But he said, no, I'm not. His mother couldn't get him up the next day. So he lost a job, which was a good job. And then he became idle, got in. I think I mentioned that story. But Joseph was a persistent worker, a good worker. And when he couldn't find his brothers at first, the Bible says that his father, in verse 14, his father sent him out of the vale of Hebron. He came to Shechem, and a certain man found him. Behold, he is wandering in the field. And the man asked him, saying, "What seekest thou?" He kept going. He kept looking. He's wandering. He's busy. And then he goes from Shechem, he goes down to Dothan, which is another 12 miles. And he's persistent. He's persistent. You think that after being sold into slavery, taken down to Egypt, and made to serve in Potiphar's house, that he would just be like, what does it pay? What does it matter? Who cares whether I work, whether I'm a hard worker, or everything's against me. Life is against me. But Joseph was a persistent worker, and he just kept at it. And makes me think of the story the Lord gave us of a persistent servant in Luke chapter 14. Luke chapter 14, the story of the servant that just kept going, kept serving, kept obeying. He was persistent. In Luke 14, you know this story, that Jesus said, beginning in verse 16, it says, "Then said he unto them, a certain man made a great supper, and he bade many. And he set his servant at supper time to say to them that were bidden, Come, for all things are now ready. And they all with one consent began to make excuse." This is like bus visitation today. You know that in 20 years, or may I say, I started youth ministry back in 1986. That's a long time ago. And I tell you what, you can see a huge change in society. Used to be you took the bus out and you could fill it up and then just 18 years ago when we came to Lee, you take the bus out around, and at one time, like one Sunday before Christmas, we had 47 kids on the bus. And I looked out and I thought, the adults are going to leave the church because there's so many kids that they're going to be like, we can't take this many kids. There were like 20 adults and 47 kids. And praise God that all the dear saints that over the years have just loved to see all the kids come in. And, that's not always the case. Some I guess highfalutin churches that get disgusted that we're never going to, Jesus says, suffer the little children to come unto me, forbid them not, for such is the kingdom of heaven, and they're so beautiful. But a lot harder now. The kid's going to sit home and play video games in the morning, or their parents, they don't have a dad anymore to tell them to get out of bed in the morning, or whatever the excuse may be. We're in this time. This servant, he goes out, he tries to get people to come to the great supper. You think that anybody would want to come to a great supper? Like, yeah, use food, I'm coming. But society, a lot of not coming to church in our day and age is just pure spiritual laziness. Spiritual laziness. And, well, anyway, they all know we can't come, we're not coming. In these excuses, they're like trying to make it sound like work. Says, the first said unto him, I bought a piece of ground. I must needs go and see it. I pray thee have me excused. Another said, I have bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I go to prove them. I pray thee have me excused. Well, just go to prove them after you eat. Like, don't miss out on the meal. How can people want to miss out on the bread of life? The bread of life. The greatest, meal, it's unto eternal life. And so another said, I have married a wife, and therefore I cannot come, or bring her with you. But anyway, so that servant came and showed his lord these things. Then the master of the house, being angry, said to his servant, go out quickly into the streets and lanes of the city, and bring in hither the poor and the maimed and the halt and the blind. The servant said, Lord, it is done as thou hast commanded, and yet there is room. The Lord said unto the servant, go out into the highways and hedges, and compel them to come in, that my house may be filled. For I say unto you that none of those men which were bidden shall taste of my supper. That was a persistent servant. I think we're coming to the point in churches across America as we tried, we went. As everybody's making excuses, God help us just to keep at it. And Joseph, what a worker, and that as you look at each stage of his life, he's just always an excellent worker. And God help us to be persistent. Another thing we want to notice about Joseph as a worker, number 7, Joseph worked with the Lord. He worked with the Lord. And whether you realize it or not, if you're a Christian, if you've been born again, you've been saved, the Lord is with you, and you work with the Lord. On the farm, on Saturdays was, I worked milking every morning, but on Saturday, was a day when some other teenagers would come in when I was a kid. And it was like, Saturday was the day when you had to shovel the calf pens out. And there was a list of extra chores. So it would be different teenagers over time that would come in and help. And sometimes I would say, oh, good, so-and-so's working this Saturday. I'm going to have good help when I shovel the calf pen out. Oh, he's a good worker. And then I'd say, oh, so-and-so's coming to work, and they're going to slow me down. They're going to be talking. They're going to be working slow. And I'm not going to get behind on my chores today because that kid's coming. Well, the Lord will never. The Lord is the good work. Jesus said, my Father works, and hitherto I work. God is all about work. He is a God. He created us to work. We mentioned last week, we mentioned many times, God set Adam in the garden and told him to keep the garden, dress the garden before the fall. Work is not a result of the sin. Work is, we'll be working through all eternity to please God. You say, heaven's a place of rest. Yeah, you rest from the tragedies and the difficulties and the heartbreaks of this life and the sorrows of this life. We're going to rest from those. But mark it down, we'll be serving God. He'll have jobs for us. He's a good father. A good father finds jobs for his children to do because he loves them, wants to teach them. And don't worry, we get to heaven. God's going to give you, oh boy, like when you're a little kid and your dad comes up with a real good job, you say, oh yeah, great, I'd love to do that job. That will be all eternity. It will be. It'll be all, God will say, yeah, I've got this job for you. It's like, for me? I get to do it for you? Well, it's the same thing today, you get to do it for the Lord. Work for the Lord, no matter what it may be. It's for the Lord. And what Colossians 3:23 tells us, how's it go? How's it go? Whatsoever you do, do it heartily unto the Lord and not unto men. If you get your mind, is the work isn't for me and it's not for other men. I'm doing this for the Lord because He wants me to work. And back to our point here that Joseph worked with the Lord, and you see that. Look in chapter 39. Chapter 39, when Joseph went down to Potiphar's house, sold as a slave in Potiphar's house. Verse 2, it says, and the Lord was with Joseph. Verse 3, we've pointed this out many times, but it's so great, we want to keep pointing it out. Verse 3, and his master saw that the Lord was with him, and the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him. And he made him overseer over his house, and all that he had put into his hand. And verse 5 tells us how he blessed Potiphar's house because of Joseph's work. Skip down to verse 21. It says, but the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison. That doesn't sound like a desirable job. Though we saw my wife's cousin Becky down in Rockland. She worked for years teaching school down in that area, and then somehow an opportunity came up, and she went and she taught for many years at the prison. And she said, teaching at the prison, the inmates were like, yeah, we messed up our lives, and now we really want to learn something, and we really want to try to get out of this mess. And she said she enjoyed working at the prison more than she did at the public school because they didn't care. A lot of them just didn't care. That's not the case. There's some exceptional kids that do want to learn. Somehow their parents must have put it into them, or the Lord. But anyway, it says here in verse 23, the keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, but the Lord was with him. And that which he did, the Lord made it to prosper. So the Lord helped Joseph work. And the Lord will help you work. And children should pray, God, help me to be a good worker, and to realize if you know Jesus as your Savior, if you've trusted Jesus, to realize Jesus is working with me. He's helping me, and He will help you to be a good worker, and He will help you to do what you got to do. Look at Genesis chapter 41. Just how Joseph knew that the Lord was with him, helping him, and that the Lord strengthens us to do what we need to do. In Genesis chapter 41, in verse 16, this is Pharaoh brings Joseph out of prison and asks Joseph to interpret his dream, and Joseph says, no sweat. I can do that. I'm good at this. I just did it for the baker and the butler. And, you watch athletes being interviewed, and sometimes it's like, I wish they'd realize that God gave them that ability. God made them 6'8", 6'9", 6'10". If they were 5'6", they wouldn't be slamming the ball like that, I know. And recognize God. Joseph, and we know that's the world, and they don't know the Lord. and that's why they're not recognizing him. But we that know the Lord should have our heads screwed on that it is God that gives us gifts and gives us the ability and gives us the health and the skills, whatever is involved in the job. But look what Joseph said in verse 16. Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, "It is not in me." Isn't that great? Isn't that great? It is not in me. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. I wonder how long Joseph hesitated or kept Pharaoh in suspense there. Like Pharaoh says, "Interpret my dream. This is just stress. I'm totally stressed out because of this dream. Interpret my dream." And Joseph says, "It's not in me. But, then God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace." God can do this. God can do this. And God works with us. And we need to remember that as believers in the Lord Jesus Christ, that God works with us. And you just be persistent, be obedient, keep at it. Paul, we'll just have to wrap this up with a few verses that Paul had that embedded in his mind, that he worked alongside of the Lord. Look in 2 Corinthians. 2 Corinthians. Now, this should just make us good workers for the Lord. Workers on your job, but also workers for the Lord. And they're in both they're intermeshed. But 2 Corinthians chapter 6, Paul says, "We that as workers together with him." We that as workers together with him. You get up tomorrow morning, go to work. Remember, the Lord goes with you. And you work for him and with him. "We that as workers together with him beseech you also that you receive not the grace of God in vain." You receive the Lord Jesus as your Savior. Make something of it. Work out your salvation with fear and trembling. Invest the talent. Invest the pound of salvation that God has given to you. Don't just set it aside. Take that salvation the Lord has given to you and use it for his glory and honor. Turn back to 1 Corinthians chapter 3. And verse 9, Paul, again, he says, in 1 Corinthians 3, verse 9, he says, "For we are laborers together with God." We are laborers together with God. Turn to 1 Corinthians 15 and verse 10. Great, such a tremendous verse. It says, "But by the grace of God, I am what I am. And his grace, which was bestowed upon me, was not in vain. But I labored more abundantly than they all." Because Paul realized the great grace of God saving him, he just wanted to work so hard for the Lord. Work so hard for the Lord. He says, "I labored more abundantly than they all." Then he says something that Joseph realized the Lord was with him. We read this morning when Barak was going through life of David. It said the Lord was with him. But it says, "Yet not I, but the grace of God which was with me." So Joseph worked with the Lord. So we got 3 more points down about Joseph as a worker, and we're going to look at the last 3 next week. Joseph as a worker. But God help us to be good workers, and God help us to train up children that will be good workers and please the Lord. And let's pray.